Hello to all my booty seekers and cheek chasers. This is the Carpe Natem Podcast. I'm your host, Nate De La Hoya-Reynoso, and I am so grateful you are listening to this episode. If you're new here, you should know that I believe that my purpose is to uplift, inspire, and educate others to communicate masterfully so that they can better understand themselves and the world around them. I've spent years in the personal development and transformational technology space, and I want to share with you the wisdom that was passed down to me from giants in the industry. So if you're on a journey of self-mastery, just like me, looking to make dreams a reality and willing to be a leader for your family and community, then join me in seizing the butt cheeks of life and giving them a big ol' squeeze. Let's jump into the show. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Carpe Natem Podcast. I'm so excited to have this guest with me today. Chris Tan is one of the hardest working comedians I have seen, and he's the host of the Laughingstock Show at the Alamo Drafthouse off Mueller. He is always writing new material. I've seen him at so many mics. It doesn't matter what time it is. He's always putting in the work. He's got years of experience, and man, I've seen you perform and you have such a solid stage presence. I'm excited to have you on here. Chris Tan, how are you?
I'm doing great. You got a cute dog. You gave me some sparkling water. That's a recipe for a good pod.
I think so too, man. I think that she brings a vibe and she always resonates with the good energy that the podcast guests bring.
Yeah, the red frohawk really says everything it needs to.
She's going for a new punk rock look. So, Chris, tell me, what got you into comedy?
You mentioned working at Wells Fargo. I used to work at a bank in New York, and I was a financial consultant there, and it was kicking my ass, so I went to a therapist, and he was like, dude, you've been doing improv. You're charismatic, you're smart, you're good looking. His words. He was like, you should do stand-up comedy. And I was like, fuck, I'm 23. Fuck it. Yeah, so I just quit, and I was like, fuck it, I'm young.
So you quit doing that to go straight into comedy?
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's such a bold move, man. Did you ever think about like any of the consequences of just quitting and following your dreams? Because
entirely. It took me 3 months to like actually follow through with that decision.
But by doing that, that is some real bravery, man. Tell me about like what that transition period was like for you.
The transition period was basically just like all the logistics. Like I lived in like a fancier part of New York that was more expensive, so just looking for cheaper apartments and then looking for side gigs to help make ends meet. I applied to Whole Foods like 6 times.
Wow.
I have 2 degrees. I got a good job. I did not get a job at Whole Foods. I'm still dumbfounded, man.
What high standard are they holding at Whole Foods?
I don't know, man. I was like legit interviewing with ex-felons.
And they were just like, nah, smart boy, you can't.
I guess not. Maybe they thought I was trolling them, but I do have a little bit. I have a vendetta against Whole Foods.
You do mention that. I do agree with what the guy said. You're very charismatic. Have you always been this type of person, or was this something that you kind of developed over the years?
I'm sure everybody has like a hint of charisma, but I think it was heightened in New York. There's one specific comedian who I saw, and I was like, oh, I like what he's doing. His name was Usama Siddiqui. He's been popping up, and yeah, if I have any ounce of a persona, it's like my attempt at like copying his, just like the charisma that he has on stage. I try to like emulate that.
Interesting. What about what he was doing on stage stood out to you that was so different and so unique?
I was, I think, like 2 months into comedy and already getting depressed. And then I went to one of his shows. I had no idea who he was. And then he just made me, like, laugh out loud. Like, my cheeks hurt from laughing. And I was like, okay, he's doing something right. So then I was just like, what did he do that was different from everybody else?
Right.
He just, like, moved around. He changed his voice, and he was just, like, pointing at people. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to do that.
Something I learned when I did start doing comedy was that there's different types of elements that play a role. Because there's obviously written work, and there's things that are like just writing on stage, for example. Some people are able to only write jokes out when they're performing. They never actually sit down and write. The other thing is like crowd work. How do you feel about your crowd work? Because for me, I feel like that's where I lack the most.
Yeah, when it comes to, I think somebody who's like within 3 to 5 years of comedy, you don't need to be that good at crowd work. Just learn how to write a joke.
Right.
So I think it's okay to like be newer at comedy and not be good at crowd work. You just have to learn how to write. I think that's the most important, right?
Do you have any tips for people who are struggling to write? Because I had Jimmy Clifford on here, and he had told me that what he does is he writes a joke a day. And that's really hard because I start writing it. I'm now writing a joke a day. And some days I just don't come up with anything. I sit there and try to write goofy things out, but nothing really comes up. So do you have any tips for people who are like struggling to write?
Yeah, I've been trying out this new technique myself a little bit. I've been like getting into Patrice O'Neal recently, and I'm late on the train, but he straight up just spoke from the heart down to the balls. Like everything that he says like comes off like off the cuff. Obviously there's writing involved, but that who he is on stage is who he is off stage. And so I think honestly just like taking something like from the world, like taking some inspiration, like I don't know, like Bitcoin. How does that make you feel? Does it sound stupid? Does it feel contrived? Is this the next internet? Like how does it make you feel? And then just like trying to like basically look at what everybody's doing and then go the opposite direction.
Sure. Like journaling, basically. You're trying to get all your thoughts out onto paper. What I've noticed with the writing a joke a day is that sometimes it's not always a good joke, but maybe a couple days from now, when I'm revisiting them, I'll think of another idea to then add on to it, and it slowly builds into like a little joke. But have you heard of this technique where you basically just write whatever monkey brain thought comes out until you basically have all your bullshit out of your head, and then and then you tear that page out. You get a fresh piece of paper, and then you start writing, because then that's where the actual creativity is. It's all behind the bullshit.
I'd say, yeah, like you have to get through like 10 minutes of legit bullshit before you get to something real. So that's honestly a good way. I like the way you said monkey brain. It's pretty accurate.
Right. It just goes into the most primal urges, where the things and thoughts that I'm thinking, obviously I'm not going to like act upon these impulses. I'm not a psychopath, but the things that come out of my head is just so violent and angry, and you get it all out. And then when you go back and revisit the page, you don't have to read anything you wrote. Just get whatever word comes out of your brow. And then from there, like you can truly be creative and kind of actually organize your thoughts a little bit better.
This is the last thing I'll say about writing. People talk about finding the voice. If you want to like become like somebody, straight up just watch their bits and start talking like them. Like start talking like Andrew Schultz. Start talking like Chris Rock. And shit, you know what I'm saying? No, that's just any black guy. I shouldn't have said that. But if you want to be like them, you got to act like them, so that when you start thinking like Andrew Schultz, like think, what would he think about the Me Too movement? Or like, what would he think about like a wardrobe? Like, and then just like, you're basically like,
and you're not saying to copy, you're saying to emulate. If there's somebody that inspires you and you really like what they're doing, you want to emulate the masters. Right. The ones who are truly about their business. Because I feel like there's also people who say that to watch other people's specials and to like watch other people's comedy will make you almost copycat or mimic them in a way that's almost, I wouldn't say it's not intentional, but you end up stealing something that they did because you consume it so much.
That's fair. Yeah. I think the easiest thing to like accidentally steal is just like the topic or like their perspective.
Sure.
But just come with it with like
with your own unique experience.
Yeah. Basically, use yourself as like a focal point.
Tell me about the show that you host.
We had our debut show about 10 days ago at the Alamo Draft House. Arguably the coolest theater because it's like in central Austin, like close to like, I guess like the heart of Austin where like all the Austinites, the remaining ones live. And we're giving out free movie tickets, giving out free booze. It's just a lot of free stuff. And then like you'll get some of the best comics in town.
That's exciting, man.
Yeah,
what made you want to put on a mic?
Oh, it's a show. So,
anything behind like wanting to do your own show and put on your own showcase? Because there's a lot that goes with it. It's not as easy as just like, hey, he's making a flyer and
No, I wish, man. The hardest part is getting butts in those seats.
correct.
I just figured, I guess like most other comics, you don't want to rely on other people to book you. So just make your own show, because then you get to be your own boss and be like, let's do it this way, this way, this way. And then, just like have creative control.
Absolutely. You carve out your own path instead of having to go down someone else's or wait for them to give you permission to actually do it. I know a couple of other people who are doing shows in town, and I think this is a really good time for comedy. As someone who's been in Austin literally your whole life, right?
No, I was in New York for a good 5 years, 6 years.
But still, like your majority of your time has been in Austin. How have you seen like the comedy scene change over the years?
Oh, man, I think before I went to college, I'd only been to two. One was for, Mike Birbiglia and then Gabriel Iglesias. And
Hell yeah, I love Gabriel.
Dude, man, he was the first comedy show I ever went to.
Really?
I was laughing my ass off. I didn't even know what was going on. And, let's see, before Austin Comedy, I think there's Cap City. I've been there, a couple times. Mm-hmm. But, now it's just the talent increases because you have people coming from all over the country here. Just
to perform on Kill Tony, to perform at Sand Jack Saloon. And
so the bar is raised, so everybody works a little bit harder.
I like it. Do you think that this is going to really take off as one of the comedy hubs of the world, or do you think this is just a trend?
I hope it's not just a trend, because legit Austin, people who live in Austin, they're the best crowds I've ever performed for.
Yeah.
Even at open mics, they're down. I lived in New York, and it was empty all the time, and then you're just in Nigerian dive bars where English is people's fourth languages. I performed there 3 times a week. I was like, what the fuck am I doing?
I mean, it sounds like you're having a lot of fun, though. It seems like there's something about being on stage that really calls to you. Is there a feeling that you get when you get on stage? Do you still get nervous before you go up?
There's definitely some nerves, but then experience kind of takes over 10 seconds in. Mm-hmm. It's just about learning how to trust yourself enough, because the stage is very transparent. How you feel is how other people feel. If you feel nervous and awkward, oh, I'm going to bomb, people can see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you're having fun, even if you're not getting that many laughs, people are yeah, I fuck with him because he's having a blast.
Right.
Why, I'd be an idiot to be upset right now.
So what do you do on days where it's tough to be positive? I know that everyone has their ups and downs, but as a host, as a comedian, as someone who's here to entertain people, what do you do during the times that it's the hardest to be cheerful?
It's interesting to hear you say entertain people. Whenever I write, take everything that I say with a grain of salt. No comic is going to give you true holy grail advice, but I think when it comes to saying stuff on stage, to be funny but also profound at the same time, it's just have stuff that has gotta come off your chest, something that you gotta get out, shit that you gotta talk about. You can't just look at sparkling water and ask yourself, what can I make funny about it? Just ask yourself, what about Waterloo berry flavored drinks do I have to say?
Interesting. That's such a unique perspective, because a lot of people, I genuinely love the absurdity of comedy. I think that inappropriate funniness or redirects or the fun are funny, but then there are people who actually can tell a story and talk to you on stage and really get you on their side, and they're making you laugh, but they're also making you think. And I feel like that's kind of the direction you're going with your comedy.
I'd say so, because I grew up being pretty analytical. I see some more creative comics out there like Bo Burnham, and I'm I can't do what he does. That shit is so meta and creative. I can be analytical, and that's my creativity to kind of blend a couple things together, but the method I can't do creatively. The theme I can do creatively. There's a distinction between the two, but I'm not formatically creative enough.
So coming from a place of analytical, you are looking at your joke writing in a way that's how are you basing your thinking around your jokes?
I have like a database.
Do you really?
Yeah,
And
like
a
an Excel
spreadsheet?
database. Like it's like 5 gigabytes now.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So are you calculating like by laughs, by words? Like what's your breakdowns?
Oh no, it's basically just like basically any thoughts that's worth archiving, I jot down, and then I like arrange it based on bits. So like one's about religion, one's about family, one's about drinking, and then I'll have like different categories for like newer jokes that need to be worked on more, mid-tier jokes that need like different, I guess, areas to be hit on, like different angles, and then more polished bits where I'm like, I don't want to touch that for a while. I'm kind of bored.
Interesting. So something that you're able to look at and actually analyze, because I just journal my jokes and I kind of have them on like different sheets, but not to this level of detail. And then you're pairing them up in like categories so that way you can talk and riff about a certain subject because you already have 3, 4, 5 points.
Right.
That's awesome. That's a really
Yeah,
good way
that's
of,
analytical. It's not creative, but that's one strength I guess I have.
It's a combination of it's a combination of both. And it shows like the professionalism you have behind your craft because you're taking it a step further than what I've seen, others do.
Right.
That's impressive, man. That's amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That means a lot. And earlier you mentioned like on the days where you feel off, like what gets you doing comedy?
Yeah.
You mentioned like doing like being a loan officer, being a security guard, and then like working at TikTok now. So you lived a couple different lives, to say the least.
Yeah, and I've lived a bunch of different experiences, and all of them have formed and kind of shaped where I'm at now. I think that when it comes to feeling like you don't want to perform, it's kind of like you force yourself to, because anytime I get on stage, the feeling kind of fades away. All my other emotions kind of get left as soon as I hop on and grab a mic, whether it's in front of a class or it's in front of a room of people who want to laugh. It's the same feeling and it's the same emotions. They all get left on the wayside, and then you're right, experience does kick in. But at the same time, it's almost like the forcing of yourself to do hard things, the forcing of yourself to be uncomfortable, only makes you better and only improves your overall game.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think if I have any inkling of skill, it is entirely because of I was just like starting out in New York, where it was like the hardest. You're with like killers all the time, people who are like straight up like living in their cars. Like there are Austin comics who live in their cars. There is an entire nation of comics living in their cars in New York.
Wow.
Like these guys are building their lives around their pedophile jokes. Like you're around these guys, and so like the bar was set so high that I think it crushed my self-esteem. So if people think I'm like okay or like I did well at a show, I'm like, no, it could be better. The self-esteem was crushed so much that it like forces you to like stay humble all the time, because like in the back of your mind, there's some assassin in New York who could kick your ass.
For sure. And they're willing to like die for their passion. They're like,
oh yeah.
Like, I feel like at some point if someone like held a knife to my neck and they're like, you can't do comedy anymore, I'd be like, okay.
Yeah, I'll do physical comedy. I'll pull a Charlie Chaplin. You mentioned earlier, like, when it comes to performing, like, why it's fun, like, why is there, like, this inclination to do it? I think, like, you've lived a couple different lives. I've been lucky enough to live a couple, too. Like, I studied religion in college, then I worked at a bank, then I quit to, like, do comedy, and then I also like lived out of a truck and traveled across like Utah, Colorado, and stuff. So like it was on that spiritual trip. We talked about shrooms earlier. Speaking of spiritual experiences,
yeah.
I like when I was like out. I love nature, like hiking and all that stuff. I was just like, man, I've never been happier. Like hanging out in the mountains, like just basically just like living.
Yeah.
Never felt more alive, more happy. But then at the same time, I was like, man, I feel happy, like, but not fulfilled at the same time, because like I just want to get good at something. You can't get good at backpacking or hiking.
I mean,
really.
You could, but the way to monetize it would be kind of crazy. Plus, like that lifestyle isn't for me. It's more of like a vacation thing.
Right.
But there is a different level of happiness of being free in the mountains, in the rivers, while on a psychedelic, that's a different level of happiness. But the one that you get on stage after crushing it, like if that could be sold as a drug, I would inject it in myself. Like that's
Right.
how amazing that feeling is.
So I've never really done cocaine. You know about it. When you I like that big grin. Sorry, I didn't mean to trigger any nostalgia.
No, I'm proud to say that I'm over 3 years clean off of it, but that
yeah.
it was a wild ride while I was on it.
I'm sure. So my question to you is, when you murder, how does that compare when you're on amazing Colombian coke?
So what he's saying in the terms of murder, he's saying that it's doing good on stage at a comedy show, not like physically murder anybody, just to clarify for those listening. So how does it feel to murder on stage? It's as it compares to cocaine. So cocaine is interesting because it makes you feel like you've accomplished something, even though you've done nothing. And it's weird because the idea is so fleeting. That's why I think like personal development and a lot of like self-improvement videos get people so addicted to them, because by listening to something, by like putting it in your brain, by talking about something, you can feel this sense of accomplishment, but you haven't done anything. It's when you actually apply action to something where you feel like you've actually done something and you have proof of it. Right? Cocaine is all of that minus the proof. So you continuously have to do it and then it starts dulling your senses. While comedy, it's that same feeling. It's like enthusiasm. It's nervousness. It's a weird feeling of just like ecstasy, which I've never felt on a drug. I felt something close to it, but I always feel like the drugs are trying to get to that same place as like having a really good performance, being on a stage and doing really, really well. There's only a select number of people that are going to be able to win a gold medal and understand how good that feeling is. But that little sense of accomplishment of doing something that you practiced to do and that you worked hard and then you actually see and witness the results of all your labor, that's worth way more than any other drug can give you. And like, I think what it really is that sense of accomplishment, but with proof. Like you actually can see in real time, like I did something good and you feel it. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it definitely does. It's almost like the same feeling, but like like from comedy, like the high is real. I guess more earned. Yes.
Right. And with personal development and like the motivation space, like there's a lot of people that consume Gary Vaynerchuk and people who listen to all the audiobooks and listens to David Goggins every morning, but then don't really apply any of the things that they learn. And I feel like in a way it could be like mental cocaine, where it's putting in the action, putting in the time to actually do something and then actually accomplishing it. It feels way different. But I feel like when you hype yourself up, or if you're with your friends and you're like, let's start a business at 12:30 a.m. at night, it's a different feeling.
It's funny that you say that because I remember in college, I was like binge watching self-help videos about like how to become a more efficient reader. And then like
Tim Ferriss?
Tim Ferriss, and then I think like Charisma on Command, and I was like 8 videos in, and then I was like, shit, I don't really read. Like, why am I watching this?
Right.
It's dangerous, man, because you do feel like a better person just from like learning how to like wake up faster, even though you're still gonna be a piece of shit tomorrow at 6 a.m.
If you choose to be a piece of shit. And that's kind of like my whole message here is that when you consume these things, it's better to consume than like the negative hate that you can listen to. I feel like you should be well balanced. Like I force myself to listen to music because the thing I listen to most are like audiobooks and podcasts and stuff like that. So like I force myself to be more balanced. But for the people who are listening to this podcast, I'm so grateful that you are, but I really hope that you just didn't listen to 10 episodes without taking any action on any dreams. Like this podcast, for example, is something that I've wanted to do for years and I never pulled the trigger on it. So now that I'm doing it, whether the conversation is awkward, whether the questions don't go, whether I think that the guest was good or bad, it really doesn't matter. The fact that I'm getting the reps in is what's like my whole thing. That's the whole thing that I'm trying to do is just be better. And that comes with time and patience. And I think that's also for comedy or for pretty much any craft. It's just the repetition of it and the persistence of trying to be a little bit better than you were the previous time.
Right. I like what you said about like just even binge listening to this podcast for 10 episodes and then not getting anything out of it. Because, like, I think with Netflix, YouTube, and just, like, scrolling through your phone, it's so easy to binge and, like, absorb so much information and then not comprehend it.
Yeah.
It's so dangerous.
It just feels like white noise at this point.
It does, yes. It's just, like, purely a stimulant, almost like cocaine, to where you just enjoy it for the moment, and then the second it ends, you're just like, what's next?
So I'm really hoping that the people that are listening to this will actually take action on the things that they want to do. I hope that by listening to all these comedians and all these people, that if there's somebody that actually has a dream and wants to pursue something, that they're willing to take that risk and know that failing is part of it, that they shouldn't have fear in actually pursuing what they want to do. You can consume all day, but I can't do your push-ups for you. You got to go get those reps in. So, Chris, tell me, what habit have you adopted in the last couple of years that has really, like, aided in your success?
Mm-hmm. When I was, I guess, kind of like a mountain hippie for a while, and I kind of, like, basically took a step back from the world, I created, like, this little life chart, going back to, like, my little joke database. I basically, like, crafted, like, a little life map where I was just like, all right, what makes me happy, what makes me sad, and, like, who inspires me, and kind of, like, just using them almost as, like, life gurus, to where if I ever, like, run across some obstacle, I'm just like, all right, how would this character from this movie handle this? And so then I basically just kind of foresee, I got, like, categorize, like, potential future problems. I'm like, all right, if I do comedy and then family hates it, how do I walk around this?
Sure.
Or if I start hating comedy, how do I assess whether, like, navigate through that? And so basically just, like, trying to, like, put my life into, like, numbers and digits, and then, like, seeing it as, like, just a math problem. I hate to say that. As a guy who looks like me, I hate to say that, but that's how I see it.
I mean, and you're really good at it, man. Like, it sounds like you really take into consideration, like, fine details that most people overlook. Was there anybody on your list of people that you saw as inspiration for? Did anyone stick out to you in particular? Like, was there a top?
Oh, yeah. Like, your wife was talking about Disney and Pixar. Edna from Incredibles.
Yeah?
That is straight up, like, on my little life map. Just like a small, ugly, but brazen bitch who doesn't give a fuck. Yeah. She basically, in my mind, when I think of her, all I think is, like, you're stupid for thinking that you look stupid.
Exactly.
That's her entire motto. And I'm just like, yeah, just apply that shit. That's how I, like, basically took something from that character, and I was like, just stole their persona a little bit.
And she's an absolute whiz at everything, and she's like has everything backed up by facts. Like, my favorite rant has to be the no capes rant.
Yeah.
And she's just all like, no capes. And then she started just listing off dates of times where that's ended up, like, being somebody's downfall. It ended up being the bad guy's downfall at the end of the movie because his cape got caught. But who else on that list is like big for you?
Bo Burnham. Actually, I resonate with him a lot, not because of the artistic genius, but he talks about, like, being bullied a little bit in high school, being called a fag, and so, like, now we think of him as, like, this artistic genius comedy whiz kid. I guess now he's, like, a fully grown adult now.
But it's someone that took their trauma and the negative things that was being thrown at them and turned it into a positive, like...
Yeah, he took his own spin on it because he grew up in, like, Massachusetts where it's, like, super masculine, and so what he did with comedy was very interesting. He basically used his wit and, like, music to, like, bring you into his world, to where you got to see, like, the real cool version of Bo Burnham, you know, like, literally, like, just dragging people into his world, because he used to be in, like, some masculine society, like, in Massachusetts, and he was just like, fuck that. And so he used comedy as, like, an apparatus to, like, loop people in so that they could see his cool side. I think that's what I like about comedy, because it just literally shines a spotlight on a part of your personality that some people have never seen before.
And then when they resonate with that idea, it's like it's funnier because like now we're both in on it. Now we're both on the same team here.
Right.
When you write out your jokes and when you are like performing, do you have that in the back of your mind that you're letting these people in to see like what's inside your mind? Like you're really trying to give them a preview of like the thoughts that you have and the ideas and concepts that you like fight with in your brain?
No, not really. I've never thought of it like that. Yes. No, that makes it seem way more artistic. Maybe that's how I should describe it. This is the real me. Yes, we're doing shadow work right now.
Oh, for real, man. Some Tony Robbins is about to come in through the door and just be like high fives. Bah.
It's so funny that you mentioned shadow work right before we started like the pod, because I remember like talking to my therapist, and he was like, "You should quit working at the bank. It's just your parents. Like you're just doing it because of guilt." And then he was like, "You should do comedy. That's the real you. That's you being like your truest version of yourself." And I was like, "This is shadow work right now, man. Like eat the shadow."
And by quitting your job and by doing the thing that you're more passionate about, that takes such bravery. And it's very commendable to like step away from a life and all the comforts and all the things that come with it to pursue something that you like are actually passionate about. Like it takes cojones, man. For those people who want to take that same step, do you have any advice to make the transition easier, or is there really no point that makes it easy? You just got to just take the leap off the cliff.
I think that's 80% of it. The hardest part of any journey is just taking the first step. But I think just taking a step back and asking yourself, what's the point of suffering if it doesn't feel good at the end of the day? I remember working at the bank. I like left the office, just got my ass handed to me, and then I went to go buy a Nintendo Switch. And I was sitting at Rockefeller Center, and like all these like families are smiling, these kids are like laughing. I just like bought a box of fun using money that I made from a job that I hate, and I've never felt more sad. And I was like, shit, if I had $1 million, this would not change.
Right.
So I guess like you can't be happy until you've like truly been sad. And so I think you got to hit your lowest low before you actually pivot away from something. Like you talked about like your cocaine addiction. I'm sure you had some rough nights. So you can't just be like somebody who occasionally does cocaine.
I had some rough years, man. Like
yeah.
it was
3 years, right? Oh no, you've been sober 3 years. I don't know. How long were you on it for?
Since I was probably, I think the first time I tried it was maybe like 19 or 20.
Okay.
And you know what really started the addiction? Was Wolf of Wall Street.
No,
I swear to God,
they got you.
I watched it twice, and I was like, I was in banking too, and I relate with you when you say that, like, what's the point of suffering if you're not even happy at it? Because I genuinely believe there's something like you can choose the suffering that you want to have. You can choose to suffer by running, by working out, by doing something, but it'll only improve you. But the suffering that you were facing working at a bank is just soul draining. It's just day in, day out, the same BS.
Yeah.
And it feels like, what's the point of doing this if you're not happy, if you're not waking up happy? And I get it. You just bought a box of happy using the money that you got from the job that makes you miserable.
I was playing Zelda, The Legend of Zelda, and I was like, this fucking sucks, man. I just want to, I'd rather be sucking dick to pay my rent and then just go tell some dick jokes.
But dude, I mean, you fucking did it. You did the shadow work. You really took time, and you had all these experiences that like molded you into the amazing human being that you are, man. And I'm super stoked to have had you as a guest, and I want to say thank you for letting me peek inside your mind, man. It's been one hell of a talk.
Thank you. I'm glad that I can show you my brain a little bit. This has been very fun, actually.
Can you tell the people how they can find you, how they can support you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Devoutly Chris Tan. Chris Tan on Facebook. And yeah, like you mentioned earlier, I run a show at the Alamo Drafthouse in Mueller called The Laughing Stock. It's at the best movie theater in town. Come out and say hi.
Awesome, Chris. Thank you so much for being a guest, and I really do appreciate you for coming in today. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Carpe Natem Podcast. If you love this episode, please consider leaving a positive rating and review on Apple Music or iTunes. It takes 30 seconds for you, but for us, it helps spread positivity to more people during these chaotic times. It helps build a community, and it makes me smile from ear to ear. Speaking of community, we have a Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Carpe Natem. Just answer the 3 questions to get access to some extra motivation and inspiration for your timeline. If you would like to support this podcast, screenshot this episode and share this to your story. Tag me at Carpe Natem 114. That's going to be my handle across all platforms, including TikTok, if you'd like to give me a follow. If you haven't already, please rate us and subscribe on Spotify or anywhere you enjoy your podcasts. And lastly, you can find all episodes, linked to resources, and opportunities for coaching and mentoring from me at carpenatem114.com. I cannot thank you enough for spending part of your day with me. You are all rock stars taking the necessary steps to be your best self, willing to do whatever it takes, and ready to grab life by the butt cheeks. So until next time, this is Nate Hoya-Reynoso signing off.